I'm Brian Karam, and I've spent decades covering politics. Now I'm taking you behind the scenes, one interview at a time.
Join us as each week Brian confronts the issues that matter, posing the questions you wish you could ask. No filter, no agenda, just the truth.
We're not here for sound bites. We're here for substance. Join me, Brian Karam, every week as we cut through the noise and get straight to it. This is Just Ask the Question, where curiosity will lead us to the facts.
Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform, and remember, when you want answers, all you have to do is just ask the question.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
Do you love badass women of history? Then you need to meet Klondike Kate, the Queen of the Yukon, and her unexpected connection to Tacoma's Pantages Theater. Join Shay and Jody of Rainy Day Rabbit Holes for a special live podcast event, Wednesday, September 16th at 7 p.m. at the beautiful McMenamins Elks Temple in Tacoma, Washington. It's a night of storytelling, local history, and a few truly questionable life choices that somehow all lead right back to Tacoma. We'll also be doing a meet and greet from 6 to 6:30 p.m., so come say hi before the show. Get your tickets at rainydayrabbitholes.com and come find out why all roads lead to Tacoma. What do you get when you combine a frontier con man, a spiritualist summer camp, a vaudeville impresario, a beach house full of secrets, and a man in a jeweled turban claiming he already knows your question before you ask it? Tonight, we're talking about Claude Alexander Conlon, better known as Alexander, the Man Who Knows, a performer who built a fortune by turning mystery into theater and theater into something awfully close to a racket. He learned from spiritualist circles at Lily Dale, crossed paths with Soapy Smith and Skagway, later did business with Alexander Pantages, and eventually created his own surreal kingdom on the Washington coast at Rialto Beach.
History is messy,
Weird, wild, anything but boring.
we're rainy day rabbit holes.
Exploring the unhinged side of history, politics, and culture.
Let's fall down the rabbit hole.
Tonight, we're joined by Tim Greyhavens, a Seattle-based writer, researcher, and independent historian of photography whose work focuses on the early history of photography in the Pacific Northwest. Tim spends a lot of time studying how people, images, and memory shape our understanding of the past, which makes him exactly the right person to help us unpack one of the most carefully constructed public personas of the early 20th century. He's also the author of a recent History Link essay on Claude Alexander Conlon, better known as Alexander the Man Who Knows, or the Great Alexander, a man who built a national reputation as a mind reader and mystic while operating somewhere between theater, psychology, and outright deception. Tim, welcome to Rainy Day Rabbit Holes.
Thanks, Shay. I'm really excited to be here, and I love talking about this story. It is so incredible. So let's dive in. whenever you're
Absolutely.
ready.
Yeah, when you reached out to me and let me know about your essay, I knew immediately that this character was somebody who had to be talked about on our podcast, because that's what we do here, is those deeply wacky characters, and even better, deep ties to the Pacific Northwest. So tell me, how did you first come across Alexander Conlon?
Well, it was by pure coincidence. I was researching a photographer who lived over on the Washington coast, a woman named Fanny Taylor, who was amazing. She was an amateur photographer in the early 20th century, lived in this tiny little settlement called Mora near La Push, and she would take these long panoramic photographs. And when I was talking to the archivist for Park Service, he just happened to say, "Oh, and do you know about that crazy magician who lived near her?" And I went, "Wait, what?
You're like,
What? Crazy?"
no, but I must know everything now.
Yeah. Mora was a town of 25 people. I mean, it was literally
wow.
like this tiny little settlement. They were all just kind of like trying to survive, farmers and people like that. And then all of a sudden, this guy, Alexander, gets dumped on them, inserted into their lives. But I'm getting ahead of myself there. But that's how I found out about it. It was just a one-off from doing this other research about a great photographer.
Did you have a struggle finding sources to learn about Alexander? And what was your best source for this story?
Well, there are 2 biographies of him, which are fairly deep, and they're very rare now to find. I guess they were produced for this sort of close-knit community of magicians today. So they were maybe like 15, 20 years old, fairly well documented. But they kind of touched on the surface, and some of them covered a lot of family stories. And if there's one thing I've learned in my research is that family stories are great, but sometimes they are just that, stories, and not necessarily the truth. So once I had read those, I just started digging in. Okay, what's the real story behind some of this? And the more I looked, the more I found, well, heck, most of this stuff is real.
Wow. I love that. So would he have been operating around the same time? You mentioned a circle of magicians in the area around the same time as Ray Gamble?
Yes. Yeah. He was in that same, it was early 1910 to 1920, some 1925 along there. I mean, he was, there was a whole circle of magicians in there. And that's one of the reasons why I think that Claude, if you want to call him Alexander, whatever, why he got away with so much, because there was this societal fascination with magic and with mind reading and with talking to the dead and seances. The 1920s were just sort of filled with that. You can find hundreds of stories of people going to seances and trying to talk to their dearly departed, and all of those things that now are mostly debunked. I won't say everything because there's some strange things out there. But at that period, there was just this real sort of mindset of, well, of course this guy can read our minds, and people can do that. That's just, what science was finding out about. So the more I dug into it, the more I got a sense that he realized this. I mean, he realized that there was this fascination in society, and because of the way his life played out, he found out he could take advantage of that, in the old sucker born every minute sort of theater.
Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take us back to the origin story. And first off, are we going to refer to him as Claude or Alexander throughout the story?
Alexander's easier, I think, because that's what he preferred to be known as. I mean, his real name was Claude Alexander Conlon, as you mentioned, but he really didn't go by that ever. And in fact, he had several stage names.
Well, let's go back to the beginning. Before the jeweled turban, before the crystal ball and the shows and the cons and the riches and the fame, let's go back to Alexander's humble or not so humble origins, and tell us the story of how did he go from, I'm assuming, a normal child to what he ended up as.
Yeah, I mean, he was in some ways a normal child, and in some ways, I don't know if you want to call it not normal, but just what we might call a wild child, maybe today or maybe in the 20th century at least. But he grew up in South Dakota, born in 1880. And his father was a doctor, one of these sort of traveling doctors at the time. So his father was gone a lot from home. And young Conlon was sort of bored. They lived in a more rural area. So he would start looking through his father's medical textbooks. And of course, at that time, there were just all sorts of strange illustrations.
Sure.
They were still trying to figure out, how the mind worked and how the body worked and how we were all sort of what we were made up of inside. And so he got fascinated by, I guess, the weirdness of our bodies and the weird connections between our minds and our bodies. And so that sort of set a tone for him this was like when he was, a 6 or 8 year old child. Then he went off to schools and he had sort of trouble with authority. He didn't like necessarily to be told what to do. And I think part of that went back to his childhood when he was left more on his own for a lot of time. So he finally went off to a medical school, wanted to become a doctor, but again, sort of got in trouble with the rules and the authority there. And at the same time, he sort of fell for a young woman who was there who just scorned him completely. And he really took that hard. I mean, he just couldn't handle it. And so as soon as he graduated, he decided, I'm going to take off and see the world, and maybe there's somebody out there, just for me.
So he actually did graduate from medical school?
He actually did, yeah.
Oh, wow.
He never did anything with it as a doctor at all, because I think he just wanted to do something more with his life. And I mean, who knows? When we're all young and our first love has been, devastating for us, or who knows how our brain works on these things. But
right.
he decided to go on what we'd now call, a road trip to go around the country. And just by coincidences, one of the places he went to was this little town called Lilydale, New York, which at that time was this famous center for spiritualists and mind readers. And I mean, there were dozens of them there in this little town of a few hundred people. And he wound up there.
So he finishes his medical school. He's heartbroken. He's doing this kind of like road trip of self-discovery. So he's in that kind of vulnerable, I mean, maybe not quite vulnerable is the right word, but maybe more of an open-minded, trying to figure out where his life is going to lead. And he falls into this.
Yeah,
so,
I think
interesting.
He's sort of both heartbroken, but also this first time he'd been out really in the world on his own. And he was, 19 or so, and found these people who sort of questioned how our brains work and what life is about. And, can we talk with the dead? So I think that intrigued him and probably went counter to anything he was taught in medical school at all. So he spent the summer there in 1897. He spent the summer at Lilydale, essentially just doing odd jobs, working around, but he got to talk with many of the people there. And they, I guess they gave him this interest in, how does our brain work and how do we connect with our bodies and how do we connect with other people?
One thing I'm kind of stuck on a little bit. So you say he was only 19 when he headed out to New York?
Yeah.
So how long was medical school back in the day?
Well,
I know that things have come a long way, but are we talking, was medical school like a 2-year thing and he started at 17 or?
Yeah, I mean, medical school, at least at the level he went to. I mean, this was not, I forget the name of the school, but it wasn't a Harvard or a Columbia. I mean, it was a little sort of rural school that taught medicine.
Okay. I mean,
So
we are still in the time where, being a doctor and the regulations around it were still fairly loose.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I mean, the John Brinkley of it all, if you're familiar with his story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's finding this place that's fostering this interest in the mind-body connection and some more kind of esoteric ideas here. So, all right. So let's get back to it.
Yeah. So now he's sort of questioning, again, what he was taught or what he saw in his father's books and even what his father was doing. I mean, part of, being a doctor is trying to heal people and keep them from dying. And then he begins to get this sense that, well, wait a minute, maybe people never really die. Maybe their spirit is still out there. And, what would that mean for me in, thinking I might want to go into the medical field, but now I'm not sure what I want to do. So he left there after that summer, and like a lot of people in 1897, he heard about this big gold rush thing going on in Alaska.
Yep.
And he literally came to Seattle and got on one of the boats headed up to Alaska to find his riches and maybe find a new love of his life.
So was he ever? I was just actually I'm kind of deep in learning about the Klondike Gold Rush right now. Was he able to actually stake some claims and make any money? I know there were times where thousands of people were going up to the Klondike and to the Yukon, and they'd get up there and realize that there's no claims left.
Yeah, from what I've been able to determine, he spent time in Skagway, which was kind of like this wild west, hundreds of bars and lots of crazy people and everybody trying to, sell things and make money off of the miners who were there.
It still is. It's just that I'm trying to make money off of the tourists.
Well, yeah, exactly. You're right
I've been
about
there.
that.
I love Skagway. I've been there many times. But yeah,
Okay.
the cruise ship tourists, you're mining the cruise ship tourists now instead of mining the miners.
You're right. It's a 21st century replay of the same thing that went on back in the early and late 19th century. But he, as far as I can tell, never actually went out looking for gold because he got fascinated by the whole theater, largely the whole scene there in Skagway of everybody trying to make money off of somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And he suddenly he wrote that, I see now that, I can make money a lot quicker by working here in Skagway rather than going out and looking for gold. And he got into it's a little hard to say. This is one of those stories, again, how well things went with him and how well they didn't. But there was a man there in Skagway named Soapy Smith, which was just a famous guy. You may have heard about him, but he's Jefferson Soapy Smith. And he became Alexander's idol because Soapy Smith did a lot of the early con games.
Huh.
I mean, he ran, this is a true story, he ran a fake telegraph office there in Skagway 2 years before there was even a telegraph line going into the city. And he collected money from people saying, oh, I'll send your telegraph off. And he never did anything, but he just collected a lot of money from people trying to say, oh, I'm here, I'm safe. Oh, I don't know where my brother is. He's out in the field somewhere. So he learned things from Soapy Smith that kind of was a turning point for him.
Yeah, it sounds like this con man had a large effect in shaping who Alexander would become.
Yeah, absolutely. And just by coincidence, there was another man there who had a large effect on him. And this is someone you mentioned, who's Alexander Pantages, who happened to be there running a couple of theater shows in the bar. And so between the two of them, they really kind of helped set his course, which he didn't know about at that time, but it did play out that way. So Soapy Smith, Alexander kind of became a right-hand man for him, I guess you would say, and helped him out. But something went wrong along the way. And about a year after Alexander got there, someone shot and killed Soapy Smith.
Huh.
And another man was arrested for it, but the authorities looked at the gun that the man had and said, well, wait, that's the wrong caliber bullet. You couldn't have shot this guy. And so they never did find out who did it. But Alexander was a witness saying that he had seen this other man. And so they started questioning him. And one of the things he said, well, I was in a good vantage point to see what went on. And that was in an actual police report. But they let him go because they had no real evidence against him. But there is a train of thought that said that Alexander killed Soapy Smith.
Does it seem that maybe Soapy Smith had double-crossed Alexander or betrayed him in some way? They had a falling out?
Yeah, there probably was something like that. They were not exactly the best law enforcement at that time, especially up there. So there never was a real story about why this happened, but it did happen. And soon after that, Alexander left town. So a little suspicious, but it could have just been one of his stories. I mean, he loved to make up stories to make him seem more thrilling and more dangerous, and just a character you wouldn't want to mess with.
So Soapy Smith dies. Alexander decides to leave Skagway. Is that the next
Right. Yeah.
step in his story? So what happens next?
Well, he spent a bit of time in Dawson, but decided he'd learned all he needed to learn, and he came back to Seattle in 1902. And he immediately really started sort of putting into play his new persona, his new life. He wanted to become a magician and a stage player and somebody who could get up there and just enthrall the public. So he started taking on a first of his many personas. And this is kind of sets the course for who he was, because his first persona was the great psycho. And who, I don't know if he was ever a psycho, but he was certainly a bit on the crazy side in many ways. But he spent a couple of years just doing sort of magic acts, sort of routine things as the great psycho. And then he changed his name to Astro the magician, and did, again, mostly more of sort of standard magic acts in the early 1900s. He went down to California. He went on sort of a tour of vaudeville theaters up and down the West Coast as Astro, and got a fairly good audience built up around him, but it wasn't really quite what he was hoping for. And that's when things, as they say, got really interesting. So in 1907, he married the first of his wives here in Seattle. And when I say the first, it's documented that he had at least 8 wives.
Oh, wow.
At least at least 2 of them at a time sometimes. Oh. And one of his biographers said there were 17 wives. So this is one of the words. I mean, if you want words to describe Alexander Conlon, I mean, he was a womanizer. He was a bigamist. I mean, you need a kind of a thesaurus. He was a con man, a hustler, a swindler, scam artist. I mean, anything you can think of. But he started out, I don't know if he ever loved any of his wives, because he always took advantage of them. He would target women that had at least some amount of money, get them to invest in his shows or do something like that. And then he would take off and sort of leave them, or say he wanted a divorce, or start abusing them in some cases. So
maybe to kind of force them to leave him so he could not be the bad guy this time.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he was he just sort of went down the darker side of humanity and really didn't come out of it there very much at all. He started starting to sort of scam other people. He there's headlines early, like 1910. Our Astro is indicted on a grand larceny charge. Oh. Astro was arrested in Mexico. Astro was shot in Mexico by a posse's office. I mean, so he didn't waste any time once he got into his Astro persona.
But did he spend any time in jail? I mean, any meaningful time in jail?
No, that was one of the lessons he got from Soapy Smith. He learned that one of the things that Soapy Smith did was essentially buy off all the local police. So he, Conlon, started doing the same thing. And not just local police, there are stories over and over again in newspaper articles, things like that, of where he'd be brought to trial, but, the evidence has disappeared from the police locker. Huh. Or, the witness who was here has now disappeared. They left town. I don't think he ever, killed anybody like that. I think he just paid off people right and left. And plus, he had a way of making friends with local police. He probably paid off some of them as well.
Do you think his fame helped with this at all, too? Or was he not quite to that level of fame yet?
No, he didn't quite have that fame. He had more of that, I guess, a persona. I mean, the descriptions of him at the time, he was said to be 6 feet 6 inches tall.
Oh, tall.
Although pictures I've seen of him with other people, he didn't quite look that tall, but I would say he's over 6 feet. He had this really penetrating gaze. You've probably seen these pictures of these early silent movie stars. They kind of look at you with these eyes because it was all about the facial expressions. So he had that same deep look in his eyes. And so people were sort of mesmerized by him. I mean, women just sort of universally thought, oh my God, this guy's so handsome and he's charming. And by all accounts, he was handsome and charming, but he used that to his own advantage over and over again.
Sounds like he was Soapy Smith's greatest student.
I think that's a good way of describing him. Yeah, I mean, he learned from Soapy Smith, but then he took it to not just one new level, he took it to half a dozen new levels as things went on.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
So at this point, he's still traveling up and down the coast performing at different theaters. So when does he really start to become more well-known, become more famous, and start to really pull in the wealth?
Yeah. Well, it was early, sort of, I think, right when the World War I was going on, so the mid sort of teens, he realized that there was an even greater need for entertainment. And this gives you sort of a sense of his depth of scamming, I guess, that he realized, oh, all these young men are going off and being killed, and all these poor families back home want to talk to their dead sons.
Oh,
And so he really, I mean,
wow.
he suddenly took it up another level, and that's when he became Alexander, the great Alexander, Alexander the man who knows, and started morphing from a magician to a mind reader, to someone who could, get messages from the dead or know. I mean, he would say, Alexander knows what you think before you even know it. And here again, the guy was just a brilliant scam artist because he didn't just rely on sort of the usual techniques. He pioneered a number of techniques of how to scam people.
So are we talking like hot reading and plants and that sort of technique?
First of all, he took on the persona of the man who knows. He wore this sort of Middle Eastern kaftan, and he had to always wear a turban on stage, big turban wrapped up around his head, so he looked very mystic, Eastern-y. And so what he learned he could do, and he, as far as I can tell, he developed this technology himself. He put a radio receiver in his turban.
What?
And an earpiece that he could hear radio waves that was covered up by his turban again.
Wow.
And he paid people, other con assistants, I guess you could call them, to go out as people came into the theater to listen to what people were saying, to write down notes. He'd listen to them talk about people. It'd be like free bars and things like that, so people would start talking more and more, and his assistants would take down notes. And so then Alexander would get on stage and it's like, who has a question for me? Let's see a show of hands. And his assistants out there would transmit to this radio receiver in his turban and say, all right, I'm in the fourth row up. The guy behind me, his daughter just died, or, any number of things like that. And so Conlon would immediately,
Wow.
wait, I feel someone out there whose daughter has just died. And I mean,
I'm getting a name
brilliant.
That starts with R.
Yeah,
it's like
yeah,
John Edwards. Like John Edwards, the guy that was so popular for so many years about talking to the dead. what he would do is he would have his assistants go on Facebook, look up people's profiles that had bought tickets for the show, and then same sort of thing. He would send his assistants out into the audience to hear what they were saying so that he could pinpoint those people that he knew were vulnerable. And so this is very interesting that this goes back to our man Alexander. Craziness.
Oh, yeah.
This is wow.
This is like 1.0 technology of
Right.
how to listen in and eavesdrop on people, and then use that to sort of delve into their vulnerabilities. If people had lost loved ones, or somebody had stolen money from them, or any
Wow.
number of things like that. And he would use this with his mysticism, with his looking like a Swami, looking like a Eastern mystic that could tell these things, and people just ate it up. He started really traveling all over the country doing this, but he did a lot of stage shows here in the Northwest, and he made astounding amounts of money.
Wow.
There are newspaper reports that in 1919 he was earning $23,000 a week during a 3-week run in Seattle. So that's 1919. $23,000 a week is now equivalent here in 2026 to $400,000 a week.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
All
That
right.
was just from one set that he did here in
Wow.
Seattle. He would go to Spokane. He would go to Bellingham. He would go to Everett. He goes to Portland.
Wow.
And so it's thought that he had probably, by the time he was 1920, so he probably was earning several $1 million a year.
Wow. So now
You know?
instead of mining the miners, he's mining the mourners.
Oh yeah,
As it
yeah,
were.
completely.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean he just took every opportunity to take advantage. Again, at the same time, he was still finding other women victims out there that he could scam more money from. He would try to run scams of people outside of the theater for saying, I've got some deal here that's going to double your money. And
Mm.
again, by the time they realized what was going on, he'd moved on to the next town. And in those days, especially, it wasn't the same as just saying, "Oh, where'd this guy go? We'll look him up."
Right.
He could be gone for months and nobody would have any idea where he is.
Do you think that he was doing any like private readings for wealthy people as well and scamming people in that way as well?
Yeah, that's where he really hit the trifecta, I guess, in that one of the things he wanted to do, when he wasn't scamming people and working on the stage, he loved to fish and hunt, which is one of the reasons he loved to come to the Northwest. And he, in the early 1920s, fell in love with this little town of Mora that I spoke about initially over on the coast. Part of it was because it was completely away from anything else. I mean, it was probably a 2-hour drive from after a 4-hour boat ride to get there. And also because the local police were pretty friendly to him at that time.
Well, especially if he's spreading his cash throughout
Yes,
a small,
exactly.
impoverished town.
Yeah. So he decided he really liked this little town. It was a place that was kind of quiet. And again, there were like 25 people. So he built this retreat over there on the coast that was, I mean, again, you can't believe the links, the depth, whatever you want to call it, that this guy went to. So here he is. There's an undeveloped area, essentially this little town of 25 people plus a native settlement there. He builds a big, not a mansion, but just a really big, lavish house, which also has 2 guest houses and a lookout tower behind it.
Oh, wow. Is it
Lookout
on
tower.
a waterfront house?
Yeah, it's on the waterfront. It's at what was we'll get to. It's on the beach there at that area, and in these houses he had specially built, he had microphones and speakers placed into the walls of both the guest houses and his main house. And he would listen in to conversations of people who were there, again, so that he could come back at some point and say, "Oh, I get the sense that maybe you're grandmother just passed away, because he had people writing down that people were listening to things all the time. And he would use this information to continue bilking wealthy clients who would invite to come there. He supposedly had these lavish parties from people from Hollywood. There were reports of Clara Bow, the silent film actress, being there, other actors and actresses being there. And one of the reasons it was so popular was Prohibition had started in the U.S. And so suddenly alcohol was not to be found. But he was there on the coast of Washington, and it was he bought a specially built speedboat that took him about 2 hours up to Canada, where there was no prohibition.
Yep, you get that good Canadian whiskey.
Exactly. So he or some of his employees would load up the boat about once a week with some good old booze, bring it back down to his estate. Sometimes he sold some of it to people who ran speakeasies underground in Seattle or Port Angeles or somewhere like that. And then sometimes he just used it for the wild parties.
I wonder if he and Roy Olmsted ever ran into each other, because that's when Roy Olmsted was the king of the bootleggers in Seattle. And I know he had a network of rum runners that would go up and down the coast then. So I'm wondering if their paths ever crossed or if they ever had any run-ins.
I would not doubt it at all. I mean, he seemed to know almost everybody, or everybody wanted to know him. And I mean, he was very, maybe not generous, but he was very did not hesitate to spend money when it was to his advantage. So that's why, again, he'd have these big parties there, or he would. I mean, there were newspaper reports of him like, Alexander is going to take the prosecuting attorney and the sheriff from Clallam County on a week's vacation.
That's not bribes at all.
Just out of the goodness of his heart.
Not to insure against future law breaking. So he's having these lavish parties. Is he performing at them as well?
There aren't any reports of that. I mean, he did sort of private seances, private readings for people, but he didn't do any sort of stage acts.
Okay.
I mean, I think it was, again, here's another aspect of it, which is fascinating. People today might know the area where his house was as Rialto Beach. It's a well-known part of Olympic National Park. And by all accounts, including the National Park Service, Alexander Conlon was the one who named that beach Rialto Beach. And there was, at the time he was doing all of his theater, a chain of theaters called Rialto Theater. Here's the fascinating thing, which took me a long time to dig into it. As far as I can tell, he never played at a Rialto Theater anywhere in the country.
So then did he always want to? Did he just like the name?
It's a couple of different theories. They're only theories I have. Well, I mean, one, there were something like 24 different Rialto theaters all over the country. And so maybe he thought this was his own little private Rialto.
Oh, okay.
I haven't played there, but I'm going to keep playing here. At the same time, the Rialto is a name just sort of for a theater district. There are newspaper reports from early 1900s of the Rialto district in New York, which we'd now call the theater district, but then they called it the Rialto district.
Oh, okay.
Comes from a Italian Venetian theater district as well. So I think he either named it Rialto because he'd never played there, or it was just his own private little joke about, this is my continued theater, but guess what? You folks who come here don't know that.
So in this, his kind of like personal rum running experience from Rialto up to Canada, did he ever run into the law? I mean, this is when they were shooting up boats out there.
Yeah. He, according to stories, again, and I've not found any documentation of this. So it's hard to say sometimes with Alexander of like what's a great story and what's a great story and also the truth. But there is a story that the authorities, the feds, had tried to catch him or his assistants running liquor for several years, and they couldn't do it. And so finally, some like new Fed, like, Elliot Ness or one of those kind of early FBI guys came in and said, all right, we're going to catch this guy. And they set up a trap for him, and they got his assistants to sort of call in sick, I guess, something like that, equivalent to that. So one night he had to go do the run up to Victoria, and they were waiting for him in the feds. And they had several boats, and they essentially directed him down a certain course on the way back down. And the story goes that they set up a steel cable between two little islands
Wow.
and directed him and his fast speedboat to go between those two little islands. And he hit that cable and essentially flipped his boat, tore it in half or so. He wasn't hurt, but he
Amazingly.
was captured and convicted for the very first time and was sent to McNeil Island Prison
Oh.
here in Washington State, just down in Puget Sound.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the story says that he was there about 2 weeks, and he bribed a guard to get him sent to the infirmary, where he bribed a doctor to say that, oh, this poor man has terminal cancer. He should be released to live out the rest of his days. And he was, in fact, released and got out of McNeil Island within like a couple of weeks.
So he scammed his way into a compassionate release after this.
Yes.
So
now,
he is slippery.
One person I know who looked in all the records for McNeil Island say they couldn't find any record of Conlon, Alexander, anybody like that there. But I wouldn't, if you think in his mindset, he could have easily had those records erased. So I don't know. It's a great story.
It is a great story.
I can't find anything about it, but I like to think that maybe that is something that happened to him.
Yeah, I feel like we can't put it past him, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it fits with things we want to believe about him. And again, at the same time, while all this was going on, he was still continuing to make a lot of money. Alexander Pantages, who he had met up in Alaska, now owned a big chain of theaters all over the Northwest and West Coast. Pantages said, hey, we'd like you to come and do your act on stage just at our theaters, and gave him something like $100,000 to do like a 3-month stint. And again, $100,000 back in the early 1920s was a crazy big pile of money. So he continued to rake in the money. But after his so-called McNeil Island stint, he sort of went back to being a little less, I guess, lavish about things.
Mm.
His house on the Rialto Beach burnt down in 1931. Nobody ever claimed exactly how or why. Some people think it was disgruntled locals who were tired of all the parties. Some people think it was like a caretaker who hadn't been paid in a long time. But it burnt down, and there's apparently the locals kind of scavenged everything else that was left there. So there's if you walk up the hillside at Rialto Beach, there's still a couple of foundation stones and things like there, but you'd have to really know what you're looking for to find them.
Do we know who owns that land now?
It's all parkland now.
Oh, okay.
It's all part of National Park. Yeah. No, in the 1930s, the National Park did take over all of that area down there, except for the Quileute Native Reservation that's there.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say that at this point, film is happening, and I am going to assume that that's going to start reducing the popularity of his shows. And I mean, the vaudeville circuit and the kind of live theater circuit at a whole has to be dwindling at this point because of the growth of film. So is that kind of where things start to turn and go south for Alexander?
Yeah, I think he was getting older by that time. I mean, he was near 50. I think he was tired of being on the road a lot. He's
got all these ex-wives.
Yeah, he's got all these ex-wives.
He's got 17 ex-wives to deal with.
Yeah. So he had plenty of money still at that point. So he went back to Los Angeles and sort of transitioned to, I guess, what's the right word, being a documentarian of magic. He published a newsletter. He wrote books. He actually wrote books that told how he did some of his scams.
Oh,
which is kind of interesting. There's diagrams of his helmet, of his little turban with a radio inside it and things like that. And
but other people were probably using these techniques at this point, so they can't have been happy with him. I know magicians don't like it when other magicians, reveal how they do this.
But you're right. I mean, by that time, the talkies were in. Most of the theater houses that were there for vaudeville or theater had transitioned into movie theater houses. So his sort of whole persona was disappearing quickly. I mean, movies early on showed that you could do tricks. People could disappear or people could appear, and so it kind of took the surprise away from some of his shtick.
Right.
So he transitioned into being a writer and a publisher, and essentially from early 1930s until he died, he just kind of did that life there in Los Angeles.
How is he scamming people at this point? It's in his blood.
I don't, it's you could look at it and say, well, maybe he sort of had a change of heart, or maybe he decided like, oh, I'm done scamming people, all those poor people. I don't know. There's some sort of change of heart he had, but it could have just been because he got tired of pretending.
Yeah.
So he
too
just
much
wanted
effort.
to sort of, wanted to say who he was and went from there. So I don't know. His life's kind of faded out, which is sort of, one hand, you could go, well, thank God that's over. He finally got tired of bilking people. On the other hand, it's just sort of, maybe he just said, okay, I've done enough. I've established my reputation. Again, by the 1930s, I mean, people like Houdini, who used to hang out with Houdini, their acts were pretty much gone.
Mm-hmm.
And, movies were the thing. Movies took over entertainment for the masses.
Right. So in Los Angeles, writing books, now leading a much more quiet life. Did he come back up to the Pacific Northwest at all?
Well, he came a couple of times. He still had friends up here. And then his very last trip here he came up in around 1950 to see some friends. And while he was here, just bad timing, he had what they thought at that time was an intestine that burst. It was more likely probably an appendix that burst.
Ooh.
And he got infected and he died in a hospital here in Seattle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's sort of like he didn't go out with a bang at all. He just
kind of a whimper.
Faded out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then I wonder then if his spirit is haunting the halls of Seattle's great old theaters, that's the few that still exist.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a spirit of him around, because there's certainly a lot of scam artists now. They've all just moved to the internet.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at his life, it deserves to be told just because it's so outrageous. And there's this, I guess there's sort of a disease about sometimes trying to make this guy look really good because he was such a scoundrel and such a abuser of women, both physically and certainly financially. And on the other hand, it's the kind of story that I think we all can appreciate and learn from, about just the different times. I mean, how naive people were at one level that you can now sort of transfer in. Well, people are just as naive on another level now. It's just all, internet based instead of theatrically based.
Right. And stories like this, there seems to be so many characters like this that come out of that mid to late 1800s, especially in the West here. The West really was wild, and there's a lot of characters that just speaks to, human behavior and human nature and the kind of spirit of the West of just, you're going to make it no matter what. Almost no matter who you have to hurt, who you have to take advantage of, you're going to make it. And it really is that, hyper capitalism in a way, because it was all about making the bucks and making the money. And there does seem to be quite a few characters that built their fortunes off of the backs of others. They're still interesting characters, even with the bad.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I do think as far as characters who sort of shaped how to take advantage of people, but also just amazing sort of theatrical personas. I mean, he developed this whole persona, and you'll see these photos of him, you can look him up online and things like that. I mean, he always looked like somebody other than a normal guy. So he created a complete personality that he lived and breathed and it worked for him.
Well, in all of that, do you think, like, after all of this, the stage and the reinvention and the scams and the myth that he built about himself, in the end, having researched his story, what do you think it was that he really wanted? Did he want the money? Did he want the fame? Or did he want to become something greater than what his life had set him out to be, or a combination?
Yeah, I think that would all depend on who you ask. I mean, there are many others out there who have looked into this guy, and a couple of biographers of him. But I think initially, I think money was his motivation. I think when he went to Alaska and he learned about how to scam people up there, and he came back, and I guess he sort of got into the game because of money. But then I think he actually just wanted to see how far he could go. Just like, what can I get away with? Are these people really that, I use the word kindly, dumb, naive, vulnerable, something? And he didn't seem to have any real remorse for what he did to people. I mean, he took money right and left. He just became the Alexander the Great. That's what he wanted to be. Yeah, and he used that to his advantage every step of the way.
Did he have children?
He did have one, well, that we know of. He did have one child. I think there probably may be more out there. Yeah,
sure, I'm sure he didn't limit himself to just the women that he was married to all at once.
Would not think so, no.
Well, like we said, Alexander, his shenanigans don't feel like they're trapped in the past. It feels like they linger today, and it kind of helped shape some of the scam artists and people who take advantage of other people's vulnerability today. But I gotta say, I think that Alexander did it with a lot more style and panache than what we have going on today, because he certainly had that.
Yeah, I mean, if you sort of dive into what went on behind the scenes, he was supposedly a very generous guy to people around him. I mean, I think he wanted to keep friends in his pocket, essentially. That story I told about the McNeil Island, supposedly the guard that he bribed there came to Seattle, and Conlon bought a home for him, and he lived rent-free in that home for the guard. The guard lived there the rest of his life.
So he actually didn't have a completely empty, rotten heart.
Yeah, so he was essentially sort of grateful for this guy who got him out of jail for the one known time that he actually was in jail. So yeah, and again, that was later toward his career, so he maybe just was feeling a little more generous about who he was and what he wanted to be remembered for.
Well, Tim, I really appreciate you telling us this story. This was great. What a fascinating character. Never had heard of him, so I feel so much enriched that you brought him to my life, and I'm sure our listeners are going to absolutely love this. So thank you so much for taking us down this rabbit hole. Where can people explore your work, and do you have any projects that you're working on right now?
Well, as you mentioned at the beginning, I am mostly a historian of photography, so I have a book out about the early photography. I'm working on another book, again, it's sort of a directory of early photographers, and coincidentally, how I originally got into the story about Conlon was from this photographer over at Mora on the coast. And the next issue of Columbia magazine, which is the magazine of the Washington State Historical Society, will have my article about Fannie Taylor, who's the photographer who started. So it's all sort of come back around. So if you're not a member of the Washington State Historical Society, I suggest you look into them. It's a great organization. And otherwise, I do have a website, timgreyhavens.com, and you can find out more about some of my work there.
Definitely check out his work at timgreyhavens.com, and check out his article on Claude Alexander Conlon, on historylink.org, our very favorite source for Pacific Northwest history. It was a fantastically written article, very, very interesting. And Tim, thanks again for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you again, Shay. This has been so much fun, and I hope your readers enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Listeners.
And
Sorry.
listeners, some people just read the transcript. I don't know.
Yeah, whoever's tuning in.
Well, and I hope next time you go down a rabbit hole on another amazing Pacific Northwest character, you know who to reach out to. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
I have a feeling I'll be in touch.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye now.
Bye, Tim. Thank you. You've been listening to Rainy Day Rabbit Holes. We thought maybe you had forgotten. How could you forget? We are your hosts, Shay.
And Jody.
And you can find all things on our website, rainydayrabbitholes.com, like sources, notes, pictures, links, whatnot. That beautiful website is designed and managed by the amazing and talented Letha Davis at easybreezy.com. That's Easy Breezy, EASYBRZY.com. All episodes are edited and produced by me, Shay, and you can reach out with any questions or comments at shay@rainydayrabbitholes.com. That's SHEA. Thanks for listening. Please share the podcast with your friends and family, and stay curious. See you down the rabbit hole. Hey, come closer. I've got a secret to tell you. It's Seattle, 1924. Prohibition is in full swing, which means the city is drinking harder than ever. Somewhere behind a locked door, Seattle's most interesting criminals are throwing a party. Bootleggers, smugglers, gamblers, socialites, and a few politicians who definitely shouldn't be there are all raising a glass together. What could possibly go wrong? And somehow, you've been invited. On October 16th, Bootleggers Ball transforms Seattle's historic Oddfellows Hall into a living speakeasy, inspired by the true stories chronicled by Brad Holden in Seattle Prohibition, Bootleggers, Rum Runners, and Graft in the Queen City. Expect immersive theater, live music, social dancing, handcrafted cocktails, and a cast of characters who may or may not be telling you the whole truth. The best part? You don't need a password. Just the courage to walk through the door. As alliances shift and rivalries simmer, you'll find yourself surrounded by the very people who built Seattle's underground empire, and a few ghosts who may never have left. Dress sharp, keep your wits about you, and trust no one. And if someone offers you a drink, well, history suggests that you should probably say yes. I'll see you at the speakeasy. Get your tickets now at strangertickets.com and search for Bootleggers Ball.
Hi, I'm Moji Alawodeyal from the Feminist Buzzkills Live Pod, the only podcast that helps you navigate the news in this post-pro anti-abortion hellscape. Each week, with co-host Liz Winstead, we dissect all the news from that sketchy intersection of abortion and misogyny with providers and activists working on the ground. The cherry on top is we have amazing comedy guests who help us laugh through the rage. Feminist Buzzkills Live drops Fridays wherever you pod. Listen and subscribe, because when BS is popping, we pop off.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.